This is Pastor Emery. In our study of Mystery Babylon of Revelation 17 and 18, I have identified red communism as part of that world ruling system. At the time of this broadcast, communists are killing tens of thousands of people in Afghanistan and have driven upwards of 1 million from their homes. Communists in Vietnam and Cambodia have killed upwards of 2 million human beings in the last 4 years. In Latin America, communist forces have taken over Nicaragua and are executing Christians and other opponents to communism. In Costa Rica and Guatemala, communist guerrillas are assassinating the nation's leaders in preparation for a takeover there. While all of this is going on, the United Nations takes no action against any communist government, and grain and highly sophisticated computers and industrial machines continue to be sent to communist Russia from America. Who orders such things to happen? Is there a secret, mystery world government now in operation? Paul wrote to Christian believers in Romans chapter 6, "What shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound?" Here is his answer. God forbid. How shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein? John tells us in 1 John 3:4 that sin is transgression of the law. As we continue our Bible study on what is Mystery Babylon, we find in chapters 17 and 18 of Revelation that she is being destroyed by the wrath of God because of her sin. In other words, because of her transgressions of God's laws. Christians are told throughout the New Testament, in the Gospels and in the Epistles, that they are to obey God's laws. They are not to transgress them. They are not to sin. Although many teach that Jesus Christ, the author of the Christian faith, put away God's laws, the Bible teaches the exact opposite. Jesus said in Matthew 5 that he had not come to destroy the law. And Paul wrote in Romans 3:31, "Do we then make void the law through faith? God forbid. Yea, we establish the law." That, of course, makes sense in the light of Revelation 17 and 18, for there Mystery Babylon is revealed as a great, anti-God, world-ruling system which fights against and kills Christians. If faith in Jesus Christ establishes God's law, then it makes reasonable sense that that world entity known as Mystery Babylon the Great would not only war against God's law, but would war against the Christians, the faithful in Christ who uphold God's law. In fact, Revelation 17 tells us that the scarlet woman on the red beast was actually drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. In Revelation 18 and verse 4, God gives the call to his people to come out of her. "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins." In other words, that you Christians be not partakers of Babylon's transgressions of God's laws, and that ye receive not of her plagues. Verse 5, "For her sins," or her transgressions of God's law, "have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities." Last week I went into quite some detail to show that the Epistle to the Galatians, which is so widely used today to teach that we are no longer under God's law, is actually an exhortation by Paul to the Christians not to practice the law of physical circumcision. He was not writing about the whole law. He mentioned circumcision 5 times in that letter, and any Bible student should easily see that that is what he is writing about. But a great percentage of the ministers still quote Galatians as if Paul was teaching that the whole law was put away. Revelation 18, the destruction of Mystery Babylon the Great. In verse 2, the angel cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, "Babylon the Great is fallen." Then in verse 4 and 5, another voice is heard out of heaven, saying, "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues, for her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. These verses are quite often quoted by preachers and religious writers today to warn Christians of joining or partaking in what they call false religions. One denominational minister will use this phrase to tell people to come out of another denomination. Or men who call themselves non-denominational will tell you that all denominational churches are daughters of the harlot mother, Mystery Babylon. One fast-growing religious group in America insists that every church group which does not belong to their church group is in Babylon, and that you can come out of Babylon by forsaking all other churches and joining theirs, and on and on. But, as I have attempted to point out in this study, Mystery Babylon the Great is more economic than religious. That should be obvious to anyone who reads and makes himself familiar with these two chapters. In the last verse of chapter 17, the angel tells John that Mystery Babylon the Great is, quote, that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. And then in verse 3 of Revelation 18 it says, the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. In verse 15, as Babylon the Great is burned up and destroyed, it says, the merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing. In verse 19 is the phrase, alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea. All of these phrases, coupled with similar ones in the books of the prophets, give every indication that Mystery Babylon is a system of economic, money, and trade control operating in every nation of the world. People often send me things in the mail, as you would suspect, books, tracts, magazines, newsletters, and so on, more than I ever get time to read. And many have, from time to time, sent me articles about the Catholic Church, articles which state that the Catholic Church is the wealthiest religious entity in the world, that the Catholic Church owns this, and owns that, and on, and therefore the Catholic Church is the Scarlet Woman of Revelation 17 and 18. Well, the Rockefeller family of New York is not Catholic as far as I know, and I suspect that they could buy up every piece of property owned by the Catholic Church in America and still have enough money left to buy up one or two Protestant denominations. And they are but one family of world traders. The Rothschilds of Europe are not Catholics, and someone wrote a book about the Rothschilds a few years ago in which he estimated their wealth and came up with the startling information that a child born to a Rothschild family in Europe, if he could get his inheritance in cash, would immediately be worth $100 million. Members of the Rothschild banking family of Europe have personal incomes in excess of $6 million per year. In other words, they could spend for their own personal desires $500,000 per month, $16,000 per day, and get richer. Jackie Kennedy, an American who married shipping magnate Aristotle Onassis, was spending, according to news magazines, in excess of $1 million per month for her personal expenses, and she didn't make a dent in her husband's shipping fortune. Several hundred multi-billionaire families control, through their thousands of corporations and whole governments of smaller nations, most of the wealth and trade of the world, and not one minister in 10,000 ever mentions economic plunder and economic control of the people and nations and the earth.